Okay.
You ready? Okay,
Yeah,
well,
Matt.
well, thanks very much for that, Steve. So really the slide you can see with all these different faces on is really what I would call, not necessarily influences, but these are the people that I've worked with either when I was in youth development and now in a first team setting, and it's changed very quickly. So I've had, I think Mark Bonner, who's our head coach at the moment, is the fifth manager since 2012 that I've had to work with day to day. When I was at Watford, Malky Mackay was manager with Sean Dyche and Dave Kerslake. They had an excellent management team, sort of the pre-Italian system at Watford at the time. So I joined there when it's, I'll talk about that in a minute really, about how that changed. And then prior to that, when I first joined Cambridge, as Steve was saying, at part-time and then full-time, Jimmy Quinn, Gary Brabin, Alan Lua, Paul Carden, when we were in the conference. So lots of different experiences. I've been involved in professional football now for 15 years and definitely I'm no expert. I've just got lots of experiences to draw upon, lots of different experiences from, as Steve alluded to, with Cambridge City, Cambridge United, in the very, very early days, building a youth scheme with no funding, no staff. I sort of look out at our under 18s at the minute now. We've got lots of specialists. We're a Cat 3 academy, going really well. But you know, you look out on the under 18s train there, we've got a head coach, an assistant coach, a full-time analyst, full-time sports scientist, full-time physio. You know, that just didn't exist. We've got, you know, a goalkeeping coach, etc., etc. The list goes on for our 18s and our PDP phase. It was literally Steve, Tom and Jez before that, with a guy called Nolan Keeley, and then I sort of replaced Steve. So we run everything from development centres all the way to an under 18s team. It was 100 hours, 120 hours a week, and that's what it was. But that's where definitely the foundation of my knowledge was built. I supersized my experience in a real quick time between 2008 and late 2009, and was really fortunate to get offered a job at Watford as assistant academy manager. An amazing opportunity. They had the Harefield School in place at the time. For those that don't know, this was a secondary school, a specialist sports area with a dome. It had also things like national ballet school there, national diving, national table tennis. So we invited the players who were secondary school age that it was the best fit for. They basically became normal school students of that, and then trained with Watford, as in myself and a number of other staff on the full-time staff during the daytime. So they got bussed in, we picked them up in minibuses from their house. They would then do their homework after school, while other players from others, you know, just as you would normally in any academy, came to the Astro, into the dome, and then they'd get taken home after. So by the time they got home at 6:30, 7:30, they'd done all their homework, they'd had a normal school life, they played for the school football team, but it was a real different way of doing it. That model has been imitated, innovated. All the Cat 1 academies have got something similar now, but it was a real game change in that sense. There was lots of positives about it. It became, after I left, they built a boarding school area into it. So someone like Jadon Sancho was an under 10 at the time when I was there. He was getting from sort of North London across to the other side to West London to Watford. He was getting a bus, a tube, but, you know, and sometimes on his own. A real tough kid at 10, 11. Obviously that's not the best setting for him to develop. So he came and lived there and then went to Man City, and then he's obviously gone on to have a fantastic career. But not just him, there's lots of other boys who were in that Harefield group. George Byers, who's at Swansea now, he's just gone to Portsmouth yesterday. There's lots of players that were very successful within that model, and equally players that went on to play in the first team or came in really late, like Britt Sombalonga, who didn't come through that model. So Watford was a real, you know, I think Britt was something like the 55th academy graduate to make a first team appearance, and then the model completely changed. We were a championship club with a real good academy, and then the new owners came in and they've obviously adopted a different model and have had unbelievable success of being a sustainable Premier League club for a number of years. I've had a little bit of a while, but that's really unrecognizable from when I was there. So I was there for that sort of 18-month period. sort of fully absorbed myself. I thought I was going to just keep on going with coaching, really. So I went and I did my A license, did all those sorts of things, and then I got offered part-time, really, to be a first-team scout for Malcolm Mackay and John Stevenson, who's down the bottom left, a real sort of football strategist. And then I spent another season at Brighton as a first-team scout for Gus Poyet. So I probably learnt more in that 18 months about the pressures on athletic profile, and really, if I'm sort of looking at it back on it now, to form where I am now, really. And a lot of the guys in that sort of bottom window, Dr. John Iger down the bottom middle, he was at the FA, then went to Huddersfield, Nick Grantham, and then bottom right, Nick Cox, who was academy manager at Watford when I was there. Now at Man United as academy manager via Sheffield United, Ross Wilson, who became head of football, then went to Southampton Rangers. They sort of really formed my the sort of bedrock of what I thought, really, of how to prepare players. So in terms of, I wouldn't say it's expertise, but my knowledge really is about trying to prepare those sort of 14, 15, 16-year-olds into first team football. I suppose that's really where I'm not most comfortable speaking about. Hang on, it's not going on to the next slide. That's where I'm most comfortable talking about and most comfortable being. So I think that's probably where we'll aim talking about, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you struggling with your slides?
Yeah, it's not moving on. Can you still see that first slide?
Yeah.
Head down to the bottom left and try one of the arrows at the bottom. Is that working?
Here we go. So I haven't tried to get every player on, but when I sort of talked about it and spoke about it, there's probably about 175 players at Cambridge United that I've worked with in what we're now going into the end of the 9th season. So the players have either come through our academy, they've joined on loan from someone else's academy. Someone like Greg has been there ever since, so he's in his 9th season, Harrison Dunk. But it's been a real mixed experience. So I've had, like I said, really a sort of supersized experience crammed into a short number of years because of where the club has gone from being a bottom end conference club to, okay, we're doing great in League Two at the moment, but we've been a pretty solid League Two club, but middle to bottom half, and are trying to make gains along the way. Probably about 130 scholars, and then I've roughly estimated it, but I've lost count really, over 600 academy players. So all with different journeys, all with different things. These are the type of questions really that, if I try to narrow it down of how my day goes, really about themselves in terms of players. How can I be better? The more common thing at the sort of down towards the bottom with social media now, there's lots of stuff out there put out by players with their own sort of PR thing, of gym sessions and et cetera, disappearing to exotic locations to do similar exercises than we would do in the gym. But it's really a minefield, athletic development now, of what's the best exercise, you know, what are players doing away from the training ground, trying to keep them on a clear thing. So you have to be, to get their buy-in, you have to be really, you have to put them in the middle of it. I think that's definitely something I've learned in terms of trying to force a program on someone. It's more about trying to put them at the center of it. Okay, what's your aims? So it might be a very small 17-year-old, you know, in terms of physical presence, in terms of how he feels in a first team environment, just wants to get obsessed with mass, physical mass, athletic gains, putting on kilos of weight and protein and supplements, and trying to sort of unpick that, where that thought process comes from. But equally, coaching staff, managers, they will equally make sort of throwaway comments, and you're trying to sort of unpick that in their head through conversation. Every manager that I've worked with has been completely different on this, different outcomes, different ways of doing it, different ways they want to organise training. So you're just trying to influence it a lot. Sports science is a real young experience, really, in that sense. It hasn't been around as long as physiotherapy and obviously coaching. So you can get bogged down in just saying, I know the answer because I've read this research article. So that doesn't work in my experience with coaches who have had an unbelievable playing experience as well. Worked with, you know, Colin Coldwood most recently, who, he played international football for Scotland, played at Euro 96, went to France 98. He played in the Premier League. I'm not going to sort of tell him he's wrong, but I really try and unpick how he wants to play, how he sees young players developing, for young players to get in his team, what do they need to do, and then work backwards from that, rather than just saying at 14 you have to be doing this, at 16, because a lot of those 14, 15-year-olds, let's be honest, by the time they're 18, 19, 20 and close to his team, he's not going to be there. So you have to be really careful how you prepare your academy players for this drive into their professional career, but at the same time trying to get them closer to the first team. So that's a constant debate, a real challenge, and something I absolutely love.
Can I ask you a question?
Those questions are the things that go on.
Yeah.
Of course.
So just obviously you said you worked with, I think, 5 first team managers since 2012, I think you said, and obviously hundreds of players. Would you suggest there's, in your experience, is it a case of gaining trust from these managers and the players? Does it take a bit of time to gain their trust?
Yeah, I think so. I think the biggest thing players will always ask is, why am I doing this? Why do I have to do this exercise? Especially players that have had maybe a negative experience of gym work or no experience of gym work. So I'm not a huge fan of just lifting weights, I have to say. That's not my sort of S&C background. I've done lots of sort of performance-based qualifications now. And in all of them, I've taken the best bits about it. But so if you take something like, the squat. So if you're going to keep lifting heavier and heavier in a squat, you have to have a real stable spine. So all the muscles around that spine really need to load up to be able to brace your body for that weight. So if you're going to try and do 140, 160 kilos squat, you're going to have a real unbelievably strong core, and your spine's going to have to generate a lot of that load. That is completely the wrong thing for a footballer, in my mind, who's trying to be loose, agile, and always on a turn, half turn. So I'm not saying you should never do a heavy squat. There's definitely a place for heavy work, and I'll prescribe heavy work in certain situations, but it has to work for that individual of what their goals are. If you have a one-size-fits-all gym program and a one-size-fits-all thing, you'll lose players. They won't do it. They won't do it, or they'll do it really half-heartedly, and then it's a waste of everyone's time, of me trying. So I'm a one-man band within the first team with our physio Mikey. There's sort of 2 of us looking after 25 to 27 players really at any one time. We don't have an under 23s. We have a development group who go out on loan and are around our training. So it's a lot of players. Trying to write 28 individual programs is tiring. So we have a sort of a common thread, a golden thread all the way through that, and then we'll vary things. So we'll have a different work for our goalkeepers, different work for our younger players. We've got someone like Wes Houlihan now, who's 38. He knows his body. He knows what he likes. He knows what he needs to do. We'll have a focus for that morning and that afternoon. We're in the gym a lot, but it's not just about lifting heavy weights. It's about that sort of body control. And like you say, if you don't get that buy-in, then it's about making gains really. I think the biggest gains I make are in terms of their body composition. And I think you can see, I always try and focus on that, their diet, their nutrition, their recovery, their lifestyle choices, because I think you can make real big progress in that quickly, and therefore you get the buy-in quickest. Something like developing strength can take quite a lot of time over a long period, and you have to really commit to it and attend and turn up, and 3-4 sessions a week. That can be frustrating for players when they don't see straight away gains. But I think if you're looking at diet, nutrition, you can make gains within weeks on that, in terms of how energized they feel, how healthy they feel, and then they'll listen to other things that you want to suggest. I think it's about picking your arguments and picking your battles, and some of them you won't win. I haven't won every battle with every player. There's certainly players that I've lost with. So that is what it is.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. Just before we move on, just the third question down from the players. We could have 10 minutes afterwards, just you and I, just to talk through that one.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, let's shift on. So really, we spoke about, this is just a Barnes Archer and Hogg study from a few years back now, so it's probably out of date and even more precise. So they measured hundreds of elite football games, and these are findings. I won't necessarily read them out to you. Players ran distances in the past. They did play, you know, football used to happen on Christmas Day and then Boxing Day. So it's not to say players in this schedule are playing more games, but the demand of them within the games, yes, the pitches might have been worse and there were no substitutions. There's loads of counter arguments to it, but the game has undoubtedly got better athletes playing it who run faster at higher speeds for longer time. So the load through their hamstrings, which is it literally is the power generator, the hamstring muscle, is huge. The load then that it takes to stop them, no different to how rugby's changed. You know, all elite sport would have changed if you looked at body composition over a period of years. So really, we're trying to prepare players for that, and then we're trying to prepare our 14, 15, 16-year-olds for something even greater in the future. But again, this is where I get away from sort of sit in the middle as someone with a coaching background, that if you just deal in objective measures of this player can run fast from A to B, we should take him to be a professional. Whereas if, you know, certain players don't do that in, say, in a testing block. So physical testing is a big part of academies now. We have to measure them 3 times a year, show progress, show how they're getting on in a range of parameters, from agility to speed to aerobic endurance, etc., jump height, etc., etc. The list goes on. But we've had lots of players who have come through that and haven't been the best in their cohort and haven't been the best athlete. But so 2 sitting on our bench tomorrow night, academy products that spring to mind, Lewis and Ben, they weren't the best athletes in their age group, but they were the best footballers. Whereas others that have excelled in those have also got into the sort of development age contract and a professional contract. So it's not, you have to see the sort of grey areas within it and compare that player against themselves and improve that player. There's a lot of scruffy movers. I was talking to you before we came on, before people joined us. Luke Berry, who was in our academy, went to Barnsley for a season, came back to us and then got sold on to Luton. He came on against Chelsea yesterday and he's a championship player. He plays most weeks, 90 minutes for Nathan Jones's team. And he's been there since League 2, League 1. There's a few like that, Pelly Ruddock and Panzo. Luke wasn't the best mover. If you did a traditional movement screen with him, you'd say he wouldn't be an athlete. He's very sort of, he's got a bit of a valgus knee. His knee drops in on certain movements, on squats, but he covers the most distance. He's like a Labrador chasing a ball on a Saturday afternoon. You know, he runs sort of 13, 14K. He's got the capacity to do so at high speed and will train the next day and is never injured. So you have to be really careful using only scientific judgment, really. So all these things sort of inform us, really, of what we're doing. And then that's really led me to these 3 things for what we've been talking about, this idea of athletic development, injury reduction, and then a real player-centered analysis. So putting the player first, what can they do, what can't they do? And then I'll give you some time to read that, really. So that's the idea of not trying to look at a textbook example. Everyone's got to move the same, everyone's got to run the same. No player will do that. And there'll be different heights, different weights, different growth patterns, you know, difference between some of those photos that you see online of someone like Ross Barkley playing in the Liverpool schools under 15s game against sort of Dots. He was just an early developer. But also my experience of in the academy at Cambridge and Watford is you get a lot of kids at 7, 8, 9s, 10s who are early practicers as well. They've just done more hours before they've got to that sort of pre-academy age. You have to be really careful to rule kids in, rule kids out in any pathway at any level, not just in the elite pathway, but they just had more experience. And then the game changes from mini football to 11-a-side football. So there's another big demand on the player. The pitches get bigger, all those sorts of things. So trying to look at when the perfect time is for a player to be assessed, I don't think that really stops. You know, I'm always fighting against the idea that the end of our scholarship at 18 should be the end point. You know, that got to go on to sort of 21, 22, 23 now. That doesn't always sit well with people in a first environment because they want players ready to go. But if we've had boys from the age of 6, 7, 8, and we're willing to put all that effort into it because we really believe in them as a player, or even 10, 11, 12, you know, some of the later ones, Harry, who I'll mention in a moment, he didn't join us. He came back to us at sort of 15, 16. So if you're going to rule those players out at 18, that's a big call to say they are or they aren't. because the development just keeps on going. If you've got the right program and you understand where they've come from and where they're moving to, and all these things really. So getting players in the best shape possible, minimizing their energy costs, so removing those energy leaks. So trying to just tidy up technique, make them turn more efficiently, make them absorb less load, maybe a footwork pattern that you spotted. Maybe a centre half jumping, can't win a header, but he's brilliant in the gym in jump height work. So you need to video his footwork patterns. Is he taking off with the wrong leg when the ball's on the other side? Does he always take off in his left leg? Does that hinder how he can time his jump? All those things are really important. And then minimizing the injury incidents. So we'll do everything we can to activate the body, prepare it, condition it, recover it, refuel it, repair it, and go on. But we've had, in the last 2 seasons, we've had 4 shoulder dislocations. We've probably had 6 concussions. All these things you can do everything you can to make a strong body, but the size of the collisions and the size of some of the players and how quick they move, those are inevitable things. We're really proud of our injury record in terms of how few we lose to what I would call training load errors, trying to spike players too early, bringing them back, hamstrings going, muscular injuries, those soft tissue injuries. We've got a really good record of that, which we should be rightly proud of across the whole staff, really, coaches as well, about how we program the training sessions to help us be better on a match day. And we've got a lot of players who just keep going. We've played 32 games so far, including cup games already. And we've got players lots and lots of players that have been available for all 32 games. So everyone's doing, a well thought out job, really. Is there anyone else about that before I crack on, Steve?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question again. You might touch on it in a bit, Matt, but just obviously we're living in strange times, and you guys have to sort of crack on, which is, it's not the worst thing, because it's not a bad thing being involved with professional football. But has it affected your role in terms of how the players can work in between games, or is it much like?
Yeah, hugely, really. Yeah, I mean, me and Mike have become the COVID police. The lads have called us, which is always nice, because we're always kicking them out of areas. I mean, they have been great. They have, the lads have really got on board. We told them in the summer, really. Mark spoke to them and just basically said, the team that copes best with this will be the ones that's most, have the best possible chance. So we've got changed outside burger van. And I know where Man City got changed against Cheltenham. You just have to embrace it, really, and just partly laugh at it a little bit, but also just say, look, this is it. There's people far worse off than us. The latest EFL guideline have come in 2 weeks ago, have basically gone back to how it was in the summer. So players are arriving in kit, no changing rooms, all indoor areas are now out of bounds. So we've got a wedding marquee, huge wedding marquee that is now our gym and has been all season. And we just get in there. It's actually gone full circle back to how I first joined at Cambridge, when we had no resources, no facilities.
Brilliant.
Everywhere was shut. Everyone said no to you. So you just have to find a solution. And I think if you're innovative and you create the right environment and you tell the lads, I know it's not great, but we're going to do this anyway, and they still get results, I think you get such buy-in. I've never been one for working in sort of Disneyland and, every bit of equipment and we'll just buy this and buy that. I'm not a big fan of that. I quite like the sort of junkyard type athlete who's just going to achieve because of it. Joe Calzaghe, world champion, but trained in a shed with his dad pretty much. It was rotten, but retired unbeaten. Those sorts of people are, or who I really sort of emanate, really. They're the people I gravitate towards, because that is most lower league footballers. We have a chef at the minute, makes food, but for years the lads brought their own. It just is what it is. But we still got promoted out of a conference after 9 years, and it's still possible. It's just about the obstacles you put in place. So it is difficult, it is challenging. So, and let's be honest, for everyone, including the people that are on this call, it's not ideal. Life has hugely changed, and they're young lads. When you're 20, 21, you want to go out and do stuff. You can't do anything. You can't do all the things that a 21-year-old can. So we try and make our environment as best as possible. Like today, it was snowing and icing. We haven't got undersoil heating at the training ground, so we've had a massive game of foot golf. So it's just it's just what you do. It's how creative you want to be in the environment that you've got, Steve. And I'm sure there's loads of better examples from people on the call of how they're diversifying what they're doing and keeping young players active. And I think our academy have done a brilliant job with our young players. They've done their own version of Soccer AM. I would definitely tune in. It's live on Saturday mornings. They've done 2 episodes now.
Brilliant.
You can get on it via Twitter. I watched it this week while I was doing a session with the players not in the squad at the stadium. It's fantastic. You know, all those things. There's so many good ideas that have come out of this. It really has blown my mind to what's possible.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
So I just give you, look, this is how we sort of know and love football. So we can talk about science and movement forward, but this is one of my favourite photos. Unfortunately, not there now. This is Hackney Marshes from many years ago, which mostly now is covered in the Olympic Park. But back-to-back pitches, you know, no big change rooms, no, you know, treating sort of people like prima donnas. It's basically, that's what it was. It's football at the heart of it. And I think the longer you can stay with that, you know, stay tuned into what you're trying to achieve is to create footballers. I don't think you go too far wrong. There's lots of ways to do it, and lots of clubs will do it differently, and lots of people in my field will do it differently. And there's also loads of terminology you can get sort of, I don't know, you can get bogged down with, especially in sports science. You know, is it what is an acceleration? Is that is that really an acceleration? Is that a band 3, band 4, band 5 acceleration? You know, you can give yourself sleepless nights really, and everyone's an expert. Football's so accessible. One of the beautiful things about football is everyone's got an opinion, whether you agree with it or not. It's there for everyone. And like I said, sports science being a fairly new subject, there's endless research going on that you have to pick the bits, not live in an echo chamber, just get the bits that match what you're saying, but really try and look at the patterns of how things are developing and feed them into your program. So really, I would say my physical conditioning methodology is along these things, really, about the increase of explosive power, the increase of being able to do that time and time again, being able to recover from it and do it again over 90 minutes plus, increase in resilience to deal with faster, stronger opponents, and real your sort of coach enthusiasm to make the sessions competitive. I think if you can make your training programs competitive and not do fitness in isolation, just endless running drills, different managers have had, you know, they've been more towards that or less towards that. But whatever you're doing, making it more competitive, you'll get more physical progress. So it can be something as simple as a race or whatever it may be, them against their own time. If you really plan your detail and plan who they're going up against and get the real minutiae of your session, you'll get a greater physical return. And that's all the way down to our youngest players. So these are just some real simple practices that I've done lots and lots of times. This sort of explosive development. So simply, you can do it with one keeper. You can rotate the goalkeepers. The keepers are busy in this session. You've literally got a line of players. Now that might go against everything anyone ever preaches about keeping kids busy, but you're really trying to start getting some work to rest ratios. So the kid can be explosive. You've got loads of footballs. You're firing one into the first player. They go 1v1 against the defender to goal. If the defender pinches it, he plays into a target goal and then gets off the pitch. The attacker immediately turns around because you fired in the next ball. So your enthusiasm and your tempo of how you create a session, and it looks a bit chaotic at times, but you're just getting this explosive outcome with a technical and tactical idea, or developing that, and you're also getting lots of decision making. You could equally just make this a run across the 18-yard box, walk back, run again. But I don't think any footballer really wants to do that. They want to play football. So the work to rest, obviously that depends on how many players you've got in the session. You can get your distances right or wrong, how far out you want to do, if you want more space in behind for the player to run into, et cetera, et cetera. But those types of things will automatically develop explosive work to rest capacity, attacking and defending. And the key thing, as we all know, that sort of work and then transition when you give it away to immediately go and press the ball again. So there's a couple of times that if you watch the Chelsea game yesterday, Tammy Abraham gave the ball up, sort of did that, and then remember, oh no, I've got to work now. So even at the highest level, it's that programming of their brain to, right, giving it away, go and press, go and win it back, transition with and without the ball, transition to work again, those types of things. The next one
Can I just,
is
before you move on, Matt?
basketball practice. Go on.
Oh, sorry. Can you
Yep,
go
go on.
back? Are you able to go back? Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yep.
A lot, it comes up on course a lot and talking to coaches, cues, and like you alluded to, cues. Well, my answer is always around, or my opinion on cues is long cues are a no-no, but short cues for me are good. And for the reasons you gave, in that football is that, isn't it? You don't chug for 90 minutes. Well, some players do, but good players start, recover. And also from take the athletic stuff out, from a learning point of view for young players, I always think that small cue, when you can watch others have a go at something, you can reflect on what you've just done, you can plan what you're about to do. I don't think it does any harm. And I think sometimes we are really intent on keeping kids going for a whole hour. I think small cues are excellent.
Yeah, I agree.
Correctly.
Yeah, and let's be honest, if you've hit the crossbar, or you know, I did this session locally. I helped just our local team out. Just said I'd, you know, sort of bored in the summer and not, you know, just always trying to offer your time to others. So our village under 13 team, I did it, and I just had all the parents that had come to watch, you know, dropping their kid off, just sitting in the summer sunshine. I got them all around the goal, and they were feeding balls back, and the lads were shattered by the end of it. So they are running to get a ball, running to get back in the back of you. There's this idea of just sort of standing like a scene out of Kes, you know, just sort of hanging around. That isn't what that cue is. It's resting to go and power again. You know, they were dripping by the end of it. And I'll show you another couple of practices in a sec that I did with them.
Sorry, Matt. This leads me to a bugbear of mine. Those on the call in the meeting who have worked with me know I don't think we work players hard enough in training. I think we're scared of really putting players through the paces. And I really think what you said, you know, within reason, you know, I think players should come off. If we're preparing for the game, they should come off training. Having put a shift in.
No, I think you have to get I really think you have to show them. So a big thing in academy football, you know, and sport has been RPE, rate of perceived exertion. You know, this sort of scale of, I thought it was a 1 easy or a 10 sort of the hardest I could possibly work. But I don't think a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old knows what a 10 is. That's not innate to them. I don't think a 14, 15, 16-year-old knows what a 10 is. You know, I see it all the time in first team environments. It's really hard. Professional football is really, really hard. So like you said, getting the right difficulty and the right planned work to rest ratios to expose them to what the game looks like. If the game is always at the front point of your mind, and work backwards from it, rather than thinking, I think this practice is quite good, I'm going to get, well, you know, you've got to run in football, so I'm going to get them run without any sort of decision making, any football, any tactical, technical. But if you look in this, you know, in this practice, right, 1v1, so the defender is immediately thinking, which foot shall I show him on? Has he had a heavy touch? Has he had his touch yet? Can I keep moving? Am I blocking it? Am I 5 yards away? Am I close? Can I pinch it? What do I do when I get it? Am I passing it? Am I dribbling it towards the goal? Do I have to beat him 1v1 to get out of that situation? Can I bounce it to hit the keeper to come out of it? The attacker's thinking, which way has the defender turned? Which foot is he forward? Which side shall I attack? Can I get him spin? Is he squared on? So if you really go at it with a coaching point of view, this 1v1 acceleration explosive practice is just a 1v1 duel. Everyone's done hundreds of times, but if you put the detail onto it, you get all your coaching in it, and it's at fast pace, and you want them to fail, because that's where the joy comes from. You want the attacker never to get through, really, because that's when you can coach. And then while this is going, if you've got another coach with you, they can keep firing balls in, and the kid that isn't getting through it very well, you can bring him out. Why do you think you're failing? Why can you never get close when you defend? Is it a decision-making thing? Is it a reaction thing? Are you forgetting to run? Or, you know, kids will forget, they'll turn around because they've missed a shot and their hands are on the head, and the other kids come through and shot straight away. So it's just, there's so much within it in a real simple practice that you can, so many moments to coach within it. So many moments to coach.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt.
Should I spin on?
Yeah, I think we're taking questions at the end, Libby, aren't we?
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
Thanks.
So this is something from basketball. This is a real simple 3-man weave. So players start 2 on one side, 1 on the other at the bottom end here. They pass wide. they loop around and they basically counterattack to goal. You can put channels in down the outside of down the 18 width. The players have got to whip around, or they can run narrow, or they can just run freely. You're basically trying to get from one end of the pitch to the other as quickly as can. Then you can add, there's no limit to what you can do. Then you can add defenders. You can add a player to hit and bounce off a target player who's got to spin off. So the defender's got to think whether to go with a man, or the possibilities on this are endless. But it is a fast practice. It is getting from one end of the pitch from a turnover to the other end as fast as you can. We still do this with our first team players. It develops high speed running values. The biggest protection against a hamstring injury for a sprinter is to sprint. So we would do this 2 or 3 days out from a game. Even our centre backs that really don't need to sprint too much in a game, they wouldn't have the same sprint metrics as other players on the pitch. It's a real protective mechanism for them to know they've got the capacity to do so. Unfortunately, as we found out earlier, the way the share screen has worked and my video footage of these next...
You know, Matt, before we move on to that, I know there's a delay.
It's not going to share. Yeah, of course.
Just on that one, I mean, those of you on the call who have done your old level 1, you'll know that was a practice in the old level 1 called Waves. And actually, your illustration is a hell of a lot better than the FA's was.
Yeah,
People used to get it wrong, but I think it just shows that. I think sometimes people go looking for these complicated practices. That practice has been around forever, and it's so good and so effective.
Yeah.
Would you suggest
so
that?
Effective. I've been.
Sorry, Matt.
We sold one of our younger players a few years back, Marcel Lewis, to Chelsea. Kind of our coaches went down to watch him train with us in the sort of 18s, 23s group. He was doing ever so well. They were doing the weave at Cobham, max speed drills to a goal with decision making. These are not things that are, just I haven't put these up just because they sort of fit tonight's webinar. Really, the most simple practices are the best ones because they have the best outcomes, and then it's the layer of detail. Where do you run? Why do you run? How do you run? And then even having things off the side of the pitch. So if there's a turnover at max speed, then you've got to run back, maybe to the halfway line or track a fullback or transition. You can just but if the fundamental part of the practice is this, physical development doesn't have to happen in isolation. It's just part of how you want to play. And especially managers I've worked with who wanted to be a real low block. They wanted to defend deep, no space behind, and then play with a fast front four. This was a perfect way to illustrate this is how we can get your philosophy, what's in your head, into a training ground practice.
Well, that was going to be my question, Matt, was have this, obviously you mentioned the low block and counter attacking. Do you feel that's come into the game more in recent years, where one of the two teams has said, all right, we're going to sit back, let you have the ball?
Yeah. I think it's more about wherever that is. I think the transition to attack and transition to defend is so important, because I've never been a big believer in sort of anyone who used to watch my under 12s back in the day used to get really frustrated, I think, because it wasn't really a clear system. I just used to coach where the ball was. So sometimes if you pressed freeze, it would look like sort of the goalkeeper, then 1, 3, 2, the people all over the place, but they were just in the best space for where the ball was. So I think you can get bogged down with systems. It's more about principles. So do you want to go after the ball, or do you want to just sit in shape? Do you want to defend the middle of the pitch? Are you going to be happy with people having the ball on the outside and then stop crosses? Are you going to get up to the halfway line? You're going to run people away from your goal and defend space and behind you? You're going to sit deep and try and break and build and play a sort of more territorial game. I think as long as a manager's really clear on that, actually the coaching framework comes really straightforward. It's when that gets a little bit muddled, where they want a bit of everything. It's really hard to prepare players for that. You need a real good player and a good coaching team to be able to coach multiple things to players, because you're basically saying, well, we want to do everything. I think that's really difficult to physically prepare for. So you then maybe get a bit generic in the way you prepare, and especially then the way you recruit players.
Thanks, Matt.
So the last one, like I said, there is a video footage of this. I'll send this to you and Libby, Stephen, and maybe you can send it out to people. It's much better than my bad Pixar illustrations, and also saved me talking and talking. We could have watched it. But so this is a simple 3v3 game about the width, maybe a width and a little bit of an 18-yard box. It's a continuous practice, so it runs itself really. So you play 3v3 to goal. The player who has a shot gets off the pitch at the far end by the goal he's shot into. The next three come onto the pitch with a ball ready. They go and attack 3v2, and then you've got a defender trailing, running back as fast as they can to get in and try and pick up the speed of play. So it's a chaotic drill. It's very fast. It's a lot of decisions for the defenders as well as the attackers. As soon as they've had an attack, need to suddenly transition into defense and decide whether they're getting narrow, whether they can just go and press the ball carrier straight away. Can they win it high up, or are they going to sink in and try and wait for the third player of their team, like a midfield player tracking back in? So are they delaying? Are they sending the play wide? They've got to deal with runners. You can put, if you want to do it sort of quite advanced, you can have an offside line after the halfway point, so they can make a decision whether they're going to let someone run or whether they're going to hold their line. The goalkeeper's got to be really, really switched on his communication about what's happening. So it's a good session for goalkeepers in terms of a lot of shot stopping and lots of things to deal with, whether they're going to come out and scramble and defend in the space in front. So it's non-stop. Again, it's very similar to the 1v1 practice, but it builds upon that. You've got a bit more tactical stuff around playing, trying to attack narrowly. You can develop it to have players on the outside, that if you want a two-touch cross to come in, so they can narrow the defenders up, play the ball wide and try and whip a ball in behind, or a cut back cross. So the defenders have got to deal with that, and the trailing midfield player's got to come with that. This is a tough session. If you've got really able athletes, you can make the pitch bigger, wider and longer for them to defend in and attacking. And obviously, depending on the number of players you've got, it depends on how long you'd run that practice. But again, another really high-paced session that is ultimately football at the heart of it, a chaotic practice that, we would find ourselves, there were situations like that on Saturday when we found ourselves, 2v2, 2v3, 3v2 wide players. We've got to make instant decisions and deal with what comes, really.
And that Matt, I was just thinking that whilst looking at that, all three practices you've shared with us tonight, they've all got goals, which might sound obvious, but they've got goals either end. Even the little one with a big goal and two little goals, and it links very nicely to the England DNA, where we're encouraged to put goals on, because players want goals. They can relate it to the game, can't they? So you're not just running up and down.
100%, yeah. Brilliant. And like I said, you could, if you were just looking at purely physical, you could get three lads on the end line and say sprint, and I'd stand there with my stopwatch, and then as they get to the other end, someone else goes. But our physical values in this, I've done loads of comparisons for coaching staff to show how much more we get out of the football related practices than we do in pure. You're always going to travel quicker, pretty much. There's very few players gifted enough to travel with the ball as fast as they travel out. So yes, you will sprint faster without the ball, but the amount of times that you'll hit that top speed in a football practice will be far more, because no one wants to concede a goal and everyone wants to score a goal. So those two things fundamentally happen within this session. It's just how you've set it up, really.
Yeah.
So I'll try and get that. We'll try and get that video to you. It's very simple, but it's a far better illustration of the practices. Where are we? Which is this one, really. So all you'd see on this is lots of errors. A coach driving the session. This is on a particularly sunnier day than we find ourselves in now, but even down the length of the pitch, having coned off areas, or you can see mannequins on the side of the pitch here, that this idea of working and then working again to get off. So both practices we did on the same day. So this is the weave followed by the 3v3 game, and then a 9v9 game to finish on a full pitch. So again, you can, the pitch variables that you play with them.
But for those on the
contender,
for those on the, well, don't let Matt tell you that it's all spit and sawdust at Cambridge United. They train on the best university pitches, as you can see. I'm not sure where we're up to, but Libby, I think we've got some questions soon, haven't we? So Matt, have you got another slide for us?
Yeah, just the last couple of bits I'll just through.
Thanks, pal.
So just to put it in practice from my experience, really. So this is This is a standard youth development model for males. There's one slightly different for female players, but this has been my experience about opportunities for development when and where. You know, like I said, the lighter blue is prepubescent, the darker blue postpubescent, and then the bigger the font, the bigger the chance. But that's freely available. You know, you can look at that, and we'll measure where our players are in terms of their peak height velocity and feed that back. You know, players who suddenly become clumsy and coaches pull their hair out a little bit, we just try and put their minds at rest that there's a reason behind it, or they're, you know, getting Osgoods and things like that in their knees and severs in their heels. I'll spin on. So these are just two working examples, really. This is Will Norris, signed, never been in an academy before, 17-year-old local goalkeeper playing first team football, step 4, step 5. Went on to play at Wembley for us, played in the Football League for us also over that 5-year period. Has gone on to, he left us for Wolves, has had an excellent loan spell at Ipswich, and now finds himself at Burnley as sort of second, third choice. This is Harry Darling. So the left-hand photo of him, has that come up, Steve?
Yes, yeah, we're there.
Can you see Harry there? Yeah. So Harry, that's him on day 1 of his scholarship, really, on the left-hand side. You know, a young boy, barely fills his kit. You know, looks a bit disproportionate, and we sold him to, well, the club sold him to MK Dons at the weekend. So a great move for Harry, great move for the club. He's been a fantastic servant for our football club, and we wish him very well for what comes next.
His brother there, Matt, doesn't he?
And then some, I'll just go real quick. Yeah. And then just some real life examples, really elite examples, not just my experience. This is, you know, Gareth Bale getting written off at 20, you know, crazy. And then obviously his body transformation, as we know, has been an incredible, phenomenal athlete. You know, get criticism from who knows where, but, you know, he's made the very, very best of himself and had a fantastic career. And then Cristiano as well, you know, a hard-working player. Every story you hear about him, he was the hardest working player in his age group. And if you've read anything about his autobiography, he was sort of begging for him, having no money. And, you know, he's just been unbelievable in his body transformation. So those really are my points, really. I think that's where I'd sum up, Steve.
Fantastic. Matt, are these slides the copyright, or we'd have to share them with punters afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Wicked. Well, we've got a few questions coming through. One of them, when you're talking about like the RPE level, the question is, do you ask RPE for the level of cognitive challenge too? Appreciate it is physical and athletic development focused, but should we be linking the psych and social too, and how hard the players are thinking, not just physically?
Oh, blimey,
great
that's
question.
a tough one, isn't it?
Great.
Thanks, Luke.
This
Great
is
question.
from
Great question.
Luke. Good question, Luke.
Yeah, great question, Luke. So the RPE is really a, you know, the sort of history behind that is it's called the Borg scale. It's like a 1 to 20 scale, 1 to 10 scale. Really, we'd use it for, you know, we'd have an RPE in mind if we know how hard that session can be, and really wanted to know how hard the player found it. And I think the biggest challenge we use it really for, I'd say, is where our players go from a part-time model at under 15, 16s, and maybe have had day release, maybe haven't, depending on whether their school allows it, you know, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, coming into a full-time environment. We really want to not cause them problems. We don't want to cause them to be injured. But it is a tough transition, training 3-4 times a week, playing sometimes twice a week. Their bodies aren't at the level they're now playing, and 16s playing as 18 up in the 18s. It's a big challenge. But that is a great question. Yeah, that is a great question to look at the cognitive difficulty of it. We'll all have players that have flown through things. So you can imagine some of those 1v1, 3v3 practices. You have players running all over the place saying, well, what am I doing now? You know, forgetting to run off the pitch, and that can challenge them. But yeah, that's a great question. That definitely needs
to put everybody's mind just to put everyone's mind at rest. Luke works for West Ham. He's got a very good job at West Ham within the academy. So I wouldn't have had a clue what he's talking about. To anyone else on the call thinking, no, he works with a good level of player. One of the enemies down in the southwest, I guess, Matt. Don't give too many secrets away. Southeast.
Southeast, that's fine. They shop in a different pond to us.
Carry on, Libs.
There's a few other ones, two on a similar level, like how would you deal with and monitor fatigue, but then also how do you test that and physical stuff? How do you test physical stuff with a lack of equipment?
Yeah, good question. So there's load of technology available, but the easiest thing is just to ask the player how they're feeling. I think you can go really, really technologically advanced. So there's ways of, and we've done it previously, of measuring hydration status, sleep status, wellness. I think that can be quite overwhelming if you've got to wake up every morning, log on to an app and fill out 10, 15, 20 questions because people want to know how you are, how sore you are, how well you've slept, what your appetite was. I think if you've got to do that every day, A, that becomes a bit mundane and you lose the value of it. And B, I don't know, some days, I've got two kids, I'm under the age of 10. I'm quite tired most days, and I have, you work in long hours. You're always in a state of fatigue a little bit, I guess. So I think there's a balance between both. I think teaching players the awareness of those things. Maybe they don't know how well they've slept because they've never really thought about sleep pattern. Maybe they don't really know about their meals, how well, what they need in their plate of food each day, on different days, on recovery days, on training days, how many calories they need. So that's really an education process. And the better you can educate them about all those things, I think the better information they'll give you and the more analytical they'll be of themselves. They're more self-aware, they're more switched on to really what the best version of themselves is and how they're feeling in that particular moment. I think if you're just doing it to gather data, you're just storing data upon data upon data. And you can build a pattern on certain players. But then if you get into a first team environment, certain more senior players, shall we say, will, maybe try and nick an extra day recovery because they're feeling extra tired or they've got extra soreness. You have to be really careful with what type of questions you ask, for who, when. It's really starting the discussion. We managed to do it with limited technology, if any, and lots of education. I would say that's what works for me, but that might be completely different for others.
Another one, which is probably more personal to you. Where do you think your focus is going to be going forward for the future game?
I think supporting players is a big part of my role. So I don't pick the team. I don't decide who stays, who goes. It's quite confident, those sorts of things are quite difficult in youth development about making decisions. It's a group of people making a decision, but if you've ever had to do it, sit in front of a child and their parents and release them, that is, you better be really sure what you're doing and why you're doing it and supporting them around that. And I've definitely done that, and that's a real difficult thing to do. So players deal with that in lots of different ways. Bad news, there's lots of bad news, behind the scenes, being dropped, being left out, your contracts, a lot of uncertainty. I don't really want to go into, I wouldn't ever name individuals, but I've had text messages when I'm sort of sat in the office, can you come out to the car park and get there? And the players in tears, 20, 30-year-old guy. So I think player support is really something I hold really dearly, getting to know them on their level, what works for them, helping them be a better version of themselves. I think that's really where I know my career has definitely gone towards, and I think that's a real strength. I think I was a pretty good coach, but there's loads better than me. I think I'm good at what I do. I'm good around people. I'm good around players in that sense. I can help them with that transition from sort of youth team football into first team football. But yeah, I think that's sort of where my focus has always been, really. But it's just got sort of a bit of a title around the first team, really.
Good stuff. And I think one really good one from another Luke, I think this is a different Luke. What did you do after you finished school to get into the industry? And then I'm going to add on to that, and how then people on this call, if they want to be where you are in a few years' time, what would you suggest to do?
So this is something, that's a really good question, something I'm quite passionate about, really. So in the position I'm in at the minute, we get lots of people that email in, write a letter. It's a very sort of grey, vanilla letter that they've sent to lots of places, and that's fine. They're trying to get an opportunity somewhere. And they'll say they're passionate about something. I'm passionate about getting involved in full-time football. And then you'll look at their CV, really, their experience, and they haven't actually done anything. My background, really, if we go all the way back, is in teaching. So I left school. I was a failed footballer. My dad's in the forces, so we travel a lot. Every 18 months a year. I didn't live in England till I was 14 properly, really. Didn't get a scholar at Brighton. Had a really good PE teacher that said, there's other ways to get into it. He was an ex-pro, to get, if football's, your ultimate aim. So I did A-level, did well in my GCSEs, did well enough in my A-levels to get to university, studied sports science because I loved that. Knew that was quite difficult to get immediately employed in. So did a secondary PGCE in PE and did my badges alongside. So I sort of had two plates that I was spinning all the time. I stopped playing when I was about 24. I was playing step 4 football. I was 24, I just finished my B license, and the manager got sacked. And I took the team for 10 games. And it was in the Ryman League, old Ryman League. And it was a crazy insight into first team football on the other side, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't want to be a first team manager at that point. Maybe I should have stayed, you never know, sort of sliding doors moments. But I knew that it was definitely the bug that I had. So I moved to a sixth form college, did every qualification going. And in that time, up until that B license, I did everything. That's why I think me and Steve get on so well, because I did every crap coaching job ever for free. I traveled to go and watch good coaches. I didn't know what good looked like, so I thought I'd better go and find out. I did holiday schools, I did soccer schools, I did every kids club going, which was just sort of glorified babysitting, because I needed to get better at that if anyone was going to give me a job and it was going to be my full-time profession. So by the time I was 28, 29, when I sort of decided, right, I'm going to get into full-time football, I'd done thousands and thousands of sessions, I'd met thousands of players. I'd done hundreds of games at all different levels, from schools football to club football to first team football. So I knew I had a sort of bank of experience behind me. That would be what I'd say. I think qualifications are brilliant. They are the way to get knowledge. You meet loads of people on them. You'll learn as much. If you've got a really good cohort of people on your qualification, you'll learn as much from the course as you will from them. And if you really explore those networks, I was really fortunate. My A license sessions at Lilleshall, in the sort of old way of doing it. I had Gareth Southgate, Steve Staunton was the England manager at the time, Martin Keown, Roy Keane was on it. It was
hang on, Matt. I'm just
learned
more.
more.
Pick the names up. Here you go, mate. Pick those up.
I learned more in the bar in the evening than I did on the pitch. I was doing my first A license session was dealing with defenders dealing with crosses. I had Kevin Pressman in goal, Jeff Kenner, who'd won the Premier League with Blackburn at right back, Southgate and Keown at centre half, and Steve Staunton at left back, and Ian Wone, who played for Forest and is now Burnley assistant manager. He was crossing the ball. Like, good luck picking the coaching points out of that one. But you just go with it, because a lot of them were transitioning from being a player into a coach at the time, and I'd done thousands of hours coaching. So actually, I knew how to write a coaching plan. I knew where my start points were going to be. I knew what was going to go wrong. They politely get in the wrong position to help you out because you're a decent lad, and you just get on with it. So that was a brilliant experience for me to sort of know that I could exist. And then really I moved away from coaching as such, because I just saw a bit of a niche really between athletic development and using my love for sports science and athletic development, and working in football full time really. So I sort of fell into the first team job with Cambridge United of setting up. We didn't have anything, there was no sort of sports science. It was a physio, a goalkeeping coach, and a manager and an assistant manager, and have really built that over the last 9 seasons. We've got a really good department of staff, and we think we've got a good practice of what we do, that we're always trying to improve. So yeah, that's really how the journey's gone on. Really, loads of different experiences to get where I am today. But it all started a 16, 17, 18-year-old just doing anything possible to be a coach.
Hey, Libs.
Great, brilliant.
Right, I think we've run out of time. I think we're over time. So as much as I'd like to carry on talking and listen to Matt, just before Olivia wraps the whole thing out, I'd just like to say thanks for coming on, Matt. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure that people on the call will have
thank you.
Just realised in the hour just chatting with and listening to you that not only are you a brilliant person, you know your football and you know your area of expertise. I think you're very modest at the start to say you weren't an expert. I think you are, and a lot of people do. But thank you so much for sharing that. We've got some questions that haven't been answered, and I know Matt will say yes to this, but I'm sure if I give him a call or send him over an email, he'll get them answered for you.
Yeah,
it might not be tomorrow because he's got to drive to Salt.
Yeah,
thanks again, Libs. Do you want to wrap up for us?
Yeah, and then equally,
Matt.
I'd say my email. I'm more than happy for you to send me an email if people have got something they want to ask, or get in touch and go via that way as well. So whatever suits.
Thanks, Matt.
Perfect. Good. Well, I hope you've all enjoyed it. We are back on Thursday with Tony. So if you're thinking, oh no, I haven't booked on for that, then just email and book on. It's not too late to do that. So it'll be great to see you all there, to see your names coming down the side of my screen. I can see some familiar names from all the Q&A, so it's good that you're still staying tuned. But if not, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks again, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Libby.
No, thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks, everyone.
See you soon.
Thank you.